I'm Nima Rajan. Canadian tech companies predict it will be months before their supply chain processes are back to normal, and they warn it will take even longer to make up for lost profits and elevated costs. This is due to a string of recent issues. The COVID-19 pandemic increased shipping costs, and shortages of aluminum and semiconductors have hampered the industry over the past year and a half. Experts predict it will take years to clear the shortage of semiconductors that emerged when people purchased more gadgets for their increased time at home. A University of Calgary study has compared the dental health of children in Calgary with those in Edmonton. Calgary doesn't fluoridate its drinking water, but Edmonton does. Dr. Lindsay McLaren, who was the primary investigator, says the study of about 2,600 grade 2 students in each city showed nearly 65% of kids in Calgary had cavities, compared with 55% in Edmonton. She says it reinforces the need for fluoridation of drinking water. The Regina Police Service and the City of Regina are studying whether possessing small amounts of drugs should be decriminalized. Councillor Andrew Stevens and Commissioner Juliette Bouchy put forward a motion for a report during the monthly Board of Police Commissioners meeting. Councillor Stevens says Indigenous community organizations, harm reduction services, and their clients will be involved. They have asked for the report to include the feasibility and implications of providing a safe drug supply to address the growing number of overdoses in the city. A man who built small shelters to keep Toronto's homeless population warm in the winter says he won't revive the initiative this year after a legal fight with the city. Khalil Seavright says he will shut down his online fundraising campaign for Toronto Tiny Shelters, and the program won't continue in the same way. The city argued the shelters were not safe and could be fire hazards. The Royal Ontario Museum is launching 2 exhibitions this fall, chronicling the experiences of the COVID-19 crisis. On September 18th, the Toronto Museum will unveil a collection of more than 100 masks made by creators across the globe. Unmasking the pandemic from personal protection to personal expression will include about 40 face coverings made by Canadian artists and designers. The ROM also plans to present a crowdsourced collection of art that aims to show what the pandemic looks like through a child's eyes. My Pandemic Story, Youth Create Portraits of a Pandemic, debuts on October 9th. Both exhibitions are set to run through February 21st. An education expert is suggesting teachers take some time to acclimatize students to the school environment again upon their return to class after a year of pandemic-disrupted studies. A number of boards in Ontario say they will be attentive to students who may be suffering from learning loss. Psychologist Todd Cunningham says students have had unequal access to online learning for well over a year, and teachers should expect a spread of academic skills. The Nature Conservancy of Canada is asking residents of Atlantic Canada to help prevent the spread of the invasive emerald ash borer. The nonprofit group says people should stop transporting firewood to limit the spread of the tiny beetle. It is destroying ash trees in Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Quebec, Ontario, Manitoba, and 35 U.S. states. The group says the metallic green bug has become the most destructive invasive forest insect in North America. It has killed tens of millions of ash trees. Police in Newfoundland and Labrador are warning residents to expect to see members of the Outlaws Motorcycle Club in the province, particularly in the central region. Authorities say the expected spike in members will likely last through the Labor Day weekend. The Outlaws Motorcycle Club identifies itself as a 1% club. They can be seen wearing a 1% symbol in the form of a patch, pin, or tattoo. The marks distinguish them from the majority of law-abiding motorcycle enthusiasts. Police are encouraging the public to steer clear of the gang and report any suspicious activities. Indigenous and Inuit women are overrepresented at Newfoundland and Labrador's only women's jail in the town of Clarenville. 22% of admissions in the past decade have been Indigenous women, and 9% have been Inuit women. Indigenous and Inuit people make up just 9% and 1.3% of the province's population, respectively. Jerry Sharp, the vice president of Paktudit Inuit Women of Canada, says forcing women to leave their kids, families, and communities in Labrador to be incarcerated in Newfoundland is as good as banishment. The Nova Scotia SPCA has launched a new pet transport program to bring in pets from overwhelmed shelters in the United States. The organization has purchased a customized animal transport vehicle to shuttle animals to shelters in Nova Scotia. 14 dogs from Louisiana arrived at the SPCA shelter in Kings County on Thursday. The SPCA's goal is to make one trip every month. All right, stay tuned. After the break, we look at the 2 pay raises that federal MPs received during the pandemic and how that compares to non-government jobs. We'll have an interview with Mr. Franco Terrezzano from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation coming up after the break. So stay tuned, everyone. We'll be right back. As the economy and individual Canadians slowly recover from the financial hit of the COVID-19 pandemic, a new report finds over 300,000 federal government employees and members of parliament received pay raises within that time. The Labor Day reality check report by the Canadian Taxpayers Federation claims the private sector lost over 395,000 jobs, compared to the 149,000 new government jobs that were added between February 2020 and July 2021. It also finds all MPs received 2 pay raises during the pandemic, ranging from $6,900 to over $13,000 for Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Well, joining us now to help us break down these numbers is Mr. Franco Terrezzano, Federal Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Sir, welcome back to Forum Daily.
Hey, it's my pleasure.
So let's start with how and why CTF puts this report together every year for Labor Day.
Well, we put this report out because a significant portion of the budget just comes from government labor costs. So if these politicians in Canada are really serious about balancing their budgets and paying down the debt, then they're going to have to take some air out of the ballooning bureaucracy.
And what would you say are the key takeaways from this report, sir?
Yeah, there's a few key findings. The first one is that more than 312,000 federal government employees are receiving a pay raise during the pandemic. Then there's all members of parliament who are pocketing not 1, but 2 pay raises while millions of Canadians struggled through COVID-19. And another key finding is that the federal government has no records of its employees ever receiving a pay cut.
And how does this sort of pay structure compare to that of private sector jobs during the pandemic, sir?
Well, what we're seeing is a tale of 2 downturns during the pandemic. One very real one full of private sector pain, and the other one full of bureaucrat and politician pay raises. And remember, these pay raises are going to mean a higher tax burden for many people in the private sector who are struggling. Many who have taken pay cuts lost their job. Many small businesses have had to shut down through no fault of their own. And we don't think it's fair to ask those struggling in the private sector to pay higher taxes to cover these bureaucrat and politician pandemic pay raises.
And we also found in the report that, unlike most provinces, the federal government doesn't have a sunshine list. So can you explain why that is?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, most provinces have a sunshine list to disclose the salaries of the top earners within their government, but the federal government doesn't have this. But we have dug up some documents to try to put that together, and we found that in 2020, nearly 75,000 federal government employees would be on a sunshine list because they make more than $100,000 in a year. Now, that list would have increased by nearly 6,000 employees just during the pandemic, and by tens of thousands of employees since 2015.
All right, sir, just about 2.5 minutes left here, but how should our Canadian taxpayers react to this information?
Well, I think this lands like a slap in the face, right? So many people have been struggling with pay cuts, job losses, especially when you and yours have been struggling to know that your representative in Ottawa has been gobbling up 2 pay raises during this pandemic. And we have to remember, this shouldn't be rocket science for politicians to reverse these politician pay hikes. We saw back in the Harper government, they stopped the pay hikes for politicians in response to the 08-09 recession. And in New Zealand, we saw their prime minister, ministers, and top bureaucrats all take a 20% pay cut to show solidarity with struggling taxpayers. And we should have seen something like that here in Canada.
All right, sir, about 1 minute and 45 seconds left here, but have federal leaders given any reason behind these pay raises during the pandemic?
Well, MPs like to say, hey, these are automatic pay raises that happen every year, nothing that we can do about it. But you know what? That does not pass the sniff test at all. I mean, if society can put someone on the moon, surely these politicians can figure out a way to stop having their pay go up during a pandemic.
And what sort of steps is CTF calling for in order to address this issue on a federal level, sir?
Well, at the very least, we want all federal parties to reverse the pandemic pay raises for politicians and federal government bureaucrats.
All right, sir. And how can Canadians voice their concern around this as well?
Well, now it's an election. Politicians have to come knocking on our doors. So we should be asking them point blank, hey, are you going to do something to reverse these pandemic pay raises?
And do we have any party leaders indicating any change in this pay process during the federal election campaign?
We've got some correspondence from MPs from all different parties saying that they don't support this, or they wanted to give back to charity these pay raises. But unfortunately, we have not seen in platforms the major parties address this issue yet.
All right, Mr. Terrezzano, always great having you on Forum Daily, sir. Thank you again for joining us today.
Hey, it was my pleasure.
All right, stay tuned. Up next, we take a look at a new documentary that examines the impact of the 9/11 tragedy on the first responders who were directly involved. We'll have an interview with award-winning director Michael Geyer coming up next. That and, of course, more news from around the world only on Forum Daily, so stay tuned. We'll be right back after a short break. With the 20th anniversary of the September 11th attacks approaching, a new documentary delves into perspectives of the first responders who were directly involved in the event. 20 years after 9/11, more than 2/3 of New York City firefighters and EMTs who responded to the World Trade Center or worked on the pile of toxic wreckage have a long-term illness. More than 11,000 FDNY members have been diagnosed with conditions from asthma and reflux to PTS or cancer. Healing the Heroes of 9/11 is a documentary that looks at the stories of 5 9/11 first responders, their battle with post-traumatic stress following the attacks, and their journey toward healing. Joining us now to tell us more about this documentary is award-winning director and producer Michael Geyer. Sir, welcome back to Forum Daily.
Thank you for having me.
Now, this documentary will be released on the 20th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks, and this is a very special anniversary considering that this is also the year that military forces are withdrawing from Afghanistan. What is the message you want to send through this film, sir?
It's a very important message, and it's that post-traumatic stress can be healed. If you can imagine what 9/11 first responders went through, what they saw, what they experienced firsthand, and their battle with post-traumatic stress the last 20 years, and then we see them heal from post-traumatic stress, that shows that anybody can heal.
And how did the idea of producing this film come about?
Well, I had a film called Wounded Heroes that was released this last March, and it was also a film about post-traumatic stress, and it featured many different alternative treatments that help anybody that is battling post-traumatic stress. Dan Jarvis was featured in that film. He runs a nonprofit called 220, and we've remained friends last few years. And he contacted me and said, Michael, what do you think about this idea? I want to do a film called Healing the Heroes of 9/11. Will you produce and direct it for us? I said, absolutely. And that started us on this journey. He literally called me about 2.5 months ago. This has been a very quick project. It's going to be so impactful, though, but it's being brought to the world by 220, and they're giving it away for free. It'll be available online for anybody to watch.
And can you tell us a little bit more on the type of mental and physical challenges that the first responders involved in the 9/11 attacks in this film have experienced?
Well, they all said the same thing, that unless you were there in person, we have no idea what really took place. Video, pictures, that it just doesn't do it justice. Many times they said the biggest thing that was a struggle was that they were there to rescue. They're all gung-ho, looking for lives to save, and there were none. That was just it was devastating for all of them. There were none. And the smell of the bodies burning, they talked about. One of our first responders, she was buried twice as the towers came down. She was completely encapsulated with a few others twice. They escaped, but of course that caused a lot of trauma. Our Pentagon first responder talking about everything he experienced, going in and out all night long, looking for people, trying to help, only to find out the next day during the daytime, he had been walking over bodies that he didn't even realize were bodies. Of course, that was traumatic for him. Just many, many things they experienced.
Some very powerful words there, sir. So walk us through their journeys that these first responders had to go through and how they eventually found healing.
Well, the good news is when we met them, they were still battling post-traumatic stress and had a lot of issues. Some couldn't even come back into New York. Carlo had never gone back to the Pentagon, even the memorial. John couldn't go back to Ground Zero. Like I said, sleepless nights, anger, isolation, so many things that they were battling for 20 years. Then we put them through something called TRP, Trauma Resiliency Protocol, which is something that 220.org does. And then afterwards, we film them again and we see the life-changing results. John does go back to ground zero. We film him in the museum walking around. Carla was going back this Saturday to the Pentagon on September 11th for the first time ever in 20 years. Life changes. If they can change, anybody can heal.
All right, sir, tell us a little bit more about this trauma resiliency protocol, how it was developed, how it works, and how many people it has helped already. Just about a minute left here, sir.
Okay, well, there are thousands that have been helped by it. And it's a neurological intervention separating the emotion from the memory. You don't even have to talk about the trauma, but they can completely heal you in less than an hour. Sometimes it takes 2 or 3 sessions, but usually less than an hour, and you get your life back.
All right, sir, just about 45 seconds here. But we're hearing a lot of concern from veterans who were involved in the Afghanistan mission this year. And you're recommending your other documentary, Wounded Heroes, might be able to help. So tell us a little bit about this film and how it could help.
Well, the reason it can help is it provides a lot of different things, not just alternative treatments that are life-saving and very similar to what Dan is doing through 220 with TRP, but there's also many other steps that can be implemented for success to help people battling post-traumatic stress.
All right, sir, 20 seconds left, but really quickly, where can our viewers watch these documentaries?
Wounded Heroes is on Amazon, iTunes, Google Play. It's all over the different platforms. And 220 is releasing the film online on September 11th for free, YouTube, Vimeo, and their website, 220.org.
All right, can't wait for that release, sir. Thank you again for your time today.
Thank you.
Up next, a look at top stories from around the world, only on Forum Daily News. We'll be right back. The World Health Organization has inaugurated a new hub in Berlin that aims to help future pandemics. The UN Health Agency's Director General and Germany's Chancellor cut the ribbon to launch the new WHO Hub for Pandemic and Epidemic Intelligence. WHO says Germany is making an initial investment of $100 million in the facility. The hub is meant to promote more effective data collection, information sharing, and analysis. This is in hopes of leading to better and more coherent decision-making after the patchy global response to the COVID-19 pandemic. A new study in the UK finds that following vaccination, the odds of hospitalization due to COVID-19 are reduced by 2/3. The large-scale study included more than 1.2 million adults who received at least one dose of the Pfizer, Oxford, AstraZeneca, or Moderna vaccine. In the study group, fewer than 0.5% of adults reported a breakthrough infection more than 2 weeks after the first dose. Less than 0.2% of adults experienced an infection more than 1 week after the second dose. People who did experience symptoms after vaccination reported them less frequently than unvaccinated people. Symptoms included fatigue, cough, fever, and loss of taste and smell. 2 human rights groups have accused both sides in the Yemen conflict of using starvation as a weapon of war. The Yemen-based Muatana Organization for Human Rights and another group, Global Rights Compliance, say they documented airstrikes by the Saudi-led coalition that hit farms, water facilities, and small fishing boats. They also documented Houthi rebel restrictions on humanitarian activities and their widespread use of landmines. Both groups called on the UN Security Council to refer Yemen to the International Criminal Court to investigate alleged crimes in the years-long conflict. A new report from the United Nations Weather Agency finds the world is getting weather disasters 4 or 5 times more often than in the 1970s. And the disasters are costing 7 times more than in the past, even when adjusted for inflation. But a report from the World Meteorological Organization finds that these disasters are killing far fewer people. Experts say that's due to better predictions, warnings, and preparations. Archaeologists have uncovered stone tools and hippopotamus bones near ancient lake beds on the Arabian Peninsula. The evidence suggests that during periods of rainy climate, the now dry region was lush and green, and early human groups and animals migrated out of Africa into the region. Until a decade ago, the Arabian Peninsula was a blank spot on the map for scientists trying to reconstruct early human migration. But researchers say the region may have played an important role as a bridge between Africa and Eurasia. The study was published Wednesday in the journal Nature. Packages have only just started reaching doorsteps in Sao Paulo's second biggest slum, Paraisópolis. Jiva Pereira was inspired by community-led distribution of food kits and donations during the pandemic. He founded a logistics startup to handle what retailers call the last mile in his community, where delivery drivers are reluctant to enter. His new company got financing from a small, favela-focused lender, and he then hired locals who were familiar with the twists and turns of the area. His company recently delivered its 100,000th package. The U.S. government's Highway Safety Agency wants detailed information on how Tesla's Autopilot system detects and responds to emergency vehicles that are handling traffic crashes. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration made the request in an 11-page letter to the electric car maker. It's part of an investigation into how the company's partially automated driving system behaves when it encounters first responder vehicles. Tesla has to respond by October 22nd or seek an extension or face a fine of up to $114 million if it fails to comply. 20 years after 9/11, more than two-thirds of New York City firefighters and EMTs who responded to the World Trade Center or worked on the pile of toxic wreckage have a long-term illness. More than 11,000 FDNY members have been diagnosed with conditions from asthma and reflux to PTS or cancer. Fire Commissioner Dan Nigro says 254 FDNY members have died in the last 20 years of related illnesses. Lil Nas X has been awarded the inaugural Suicide Prevention Advocate of the Year award from the advocacy group The Trevor Project. The Trevor Project is a nonprofit dedicated to suicide prevention and crisis intervention for LGBTQ young people. The Trevor Project survey on LGBTQ youth mental health in 2021 found that 42% seriously considered attempting suicide in the past year, including over half of transgender and non-binary youth. The heir of a late Duke who sold Sting his Tuscan winery 25 years ago says an apology from the singer has hit a flat note. Sting said in a recent interview he was persuaded to buy his Pelagio estate by a glass of excellent red, only to learn later that the wine was from another region. Sting apologized. And that'll do it for your look at national and international news. I'm Nima Rajan, and this was Forum Daily.